time we are looking at the definitions or looking into the definitions given by scholars and how can mark geomorphology or how geomorphology involves what we call the comprehensive understanding of structures, processes, and stages, as well as types of the relief. So when you look at the first aspect there, it is going to be looking at what we call the structures. With the structures, we say that this one is concerned not only features, but it also looks at rock features in terms of folds. Uh, talk about folds and the formative or formities, but also includes the way by which the earth material are producing landforms that differ from another in terms of physical and chemical attributes. So, with the structures, we are going to be seeing all for it is concerned with the rocks. In terms of the folds, talk about also folding. So, with that process or the structure, for it only deals with those aspects. In terms of rocks, that means that if you are looking at structure, we are going to be able to determine the phenomena in terms of rock attributes, where we shall be able to know the presence of disjointed rocks. We look at also the hardness, we look at permeability, we look at also the pH in terms of the structure of a given rock feature. So structure will help us to know the different hard rocks, the joints between the rocks, or the absence of joints within a rock, and also how these landforms can be showing the relationship between a region and what we have termed as the rock or strata. So that's how the structure will be looking like. And then when we go on, we have what we call process. With the process, we are looking at the landscape as a result of very many external and internal processes. For instance, when you are talking about the internal forces or processes, these ones will include the forces in terms of earthquake, talk about volcanoes, and also the external, it will be including processes like weathering, talk about running water, talk about ice and air. So those are some of the external forces that tend to be happening within the Earth's crust. Then within the Earth's interior, we talked about processes brought about by earthquake, then talk about volcanoes. So when you go on, we are going to be seeing how weathering, it plays a vital role in terms of development. When you look at weathering, on the other hand, it is as a result of decay. Talk about all decomposition and transportation of rock material. In other words, from the pre-existing rocks. So that's how the process, in terms of structure, we talked about it. Now, in terms of process, we have talked about those processes or what we have termed as geomorphological processes under a massive change. But now when you see these geomorphological processes, these ones are a result of very many changes in terms of climate, talk about vegetation, talk about also in terms of altitude, simply because we are talking about that deals with weathering. So for weathering to occur, that means that the climatic aspect has to be considered. Then also talk about in terms of vegetation and also talk about in terms of altitude. When you look at climate for it, the climatic conditions, We have areas that tend to be receiving heavy rainfall. There is a given specific type of weathering that usually takes place in those areas, especially areas that are under what we call humid conditions. So we expect what we call the chemical weathering to take a place. Whereas areas that tend to be having no, all areas that tend to be receiving little rainfall, they will be leading to what we call physical weathering. Then they talk about vegetation. The presence of vegetation, that means that it will encourage chemical weathering due to the decaying of that material that will be, or where the nutrients will be forced to move from the upper layer down into the slope or down into the physical crust. Then the other thing about vegetation, if there is places, chemical is going to be taking place. If there is an absence, it means physical weathering will have to take place. Then they are talking about altitude. When you look at altitude, you are looking at the height above the sea level in terms of depth. So that one, it has also brought about changes in terms of geological or geomorphological processes. The other thing in terms of altitude, what I forgot to tell you that when you have areas that are well or areas that are steepened, that means that they will fasten the surface runoff of material, bringing about what we call the physical weathering processes. Whereas areas like gentle slopes and lowlands, for them they attain the maximum decomposition or deposition of material that will bring in what we call a chemical weathering. So that's how it is in terms of the processes, how geological process will be undergoing a massive change. Then the other, when we push on, we are looking at the stages. When we talk about stages, we are referring to time for the process to take a place, or for the process uh, to undergo its development, or what we have termed as time. So they are saying that the fundamental principles of geomorphology are based on the process that acts and brings a change in the appearance of different landscape with a passage of time. So when you look at the slope, or what we can term as slope development, when you look at the slope, let me assume in terms of uh, an area that has got hills or mountainous. When you look at the stages and the features that will be developing at a given place, it will be depending on how the slope looks like. When you have a very steepened area, that means that it will be bringing the fastest run of material. Then when it comes to what we call the gentle slopes, it will be moderate. Then the other, in terms of relevance, it will be slow. That is in terms of stages. For instance, we can also attribute this to what we call the cycle of erosion, in which Downs mentioned that every landform passes through 3 stages of development. For instance, when you look at the infill stage or when you look at the reverse stage, and when you look at the river stage or reverse action, you have a part or you have different stages of a river. We have talked about the youth, then you talk about maturity and also the old stage. So when you look at each and every stage, they are all they are given features that tend to be developing from those areas, and and for how long these features will be taken to be formed. So for anything or for any development that may be occurring onto Earth's surface, for it to be undergoing some given time, if you are in need of creating gullies, it may rain, but it will not form bigger gullies, but it will start forming what we call a release at the smaller time that's given to it. But the longer time it takes when it is raining, we shall be seeing the bigger gullies being formed. So that is the aspect concerning about time. And when you look at that, the person that is known for that development of landforms, and that person who came with that concept or that work is known as the W.M. Davis. The one that he came with that initiative of developing time or what we have termed as the stage. When you go we are going now to be looking at what we have termed as the order. We are going to be looking at the order on the basis of the size, depending on the reef features. We are going to be seeing the divisions between the reef features. When you look at the reef features here, in terms of the nature and the scope of physical geography, we usually talk about the first order, the reef of the first order. When you look at the reef of the first order, this one mainly deals with what we call continents, which account around 29.2% in terms of ocean basins, and it also accounts about 70.8% of the Earth's surface. This one deals with the reef, which is fairly suitable, but showing a sign of change in the form of geomorphological history in terms of evidences and information that may be gathered about the extension and the geological location of a given area. Now, when you look at seas and oceans, we were talking about them in terms of percentage, in terms of ocean basins, and also we have talked about them in terms of the Earth's surface. When you look at the first stage or the first order, it deals with the seas and the oceans. But when you look at it, imagine we talked about translations and regressions some time back. When you look at translation, we are referring to the sea level changes. Actually, it is called rise. Translation is called rise in the sea level changes, whereas regression it mainly deals with what we call a fall in the sea level changes. So, when you have a decline in the water levels, it means that there are those landforms that will be tending to be appearing within the sea. And then when water increases, there are those landforms that will be actually be formed also. Talk about the floodplains will also be there and other things. So when you look at the first stage, there are those landforms that tend to be exposed in the case of regression. For instance, I talk about raised beaches. I talk about the cliffs, raised cliffs. Talk about raised gears and very many others. So those are some of the examples that may become as that of the first stage when we have a decline in terms of the ocean waters in terms of percentage there. The other thing is the second order. These ones are called what we call the structural landforms, are usually what we have termed as superimposed oral continents and basins like mountains, plateaus, and plains on the continent. They are saying that the main ocean ridges and then oceanic plates then talk about the terraces on the ocean floors along which major features on the continental margins may be in existence. So here we are looking at the interaction between what we have termed as the endogenic forces. These ones are force working into the Earth's crust. And also we are seeing that the endogenic process and the exogenic process play a vital role in terms of this formation or in terms of the reef features of the secondary order. And when you look at these ones, for this are prepared based on the development of the reef features of about the 30 features. And now, but to understand what we call the reef features on the second order, that means that you must have gone through what we have called the reef features of the third order. This one, the third order, for it looks at the landforms it looks at the order of the orders, or it looks at what we call or they are formed on the reef features of secondary order. They are saying that these ones are just an outcome or an action of endogenic processes. When talk about the endogenic, it is exogenic processes. Endogenic processes, we are going to be looking at the work of running water across the slope. Also, we shall be seeing that there is also the influence of ice or the movement of ice, what we have termed as glacier, to talk about winds and also talk about what we call waves. So landforms here may be formed as that of wave erosion, or we are going to be seeing erosional work of the ongenic process in terms of features that may be formed at the end. We are saying that the erosional work of exogenic forces, we have what we call the valleys, or we have done, or we can call them hanging valleys. Talk about mushrooms, then talk about cliffs, bays, and the other landform that may be coming as that of wave erosion. But also all putting also in mind that when you have rivers work, we shall be having erosion and also deposition. So that means that we are going to be having another things that we are going to be having other landforms that may be formed at the end. In terms of alluvial fans, I talk about the overflow lakes, talk about the natural levees, I talk about the floodplains plus deltas and the moraines. So those are some of the things that may be formed as that of a deposition there. So when we talk about deposition, remember you are talking about an aspect brought about rivers and rivers. Then also winds, that when winds are blowing, they may bring what we call the sandy dunes at the end. It is the third order brought about by the action or the work of uh, erosion onto what we have called exogenic forces. And then when we talk about lakes, you can mention as many landforms that may be brought about by erosion and deposition. So with that, I beg to stop there, whereby next time we shall be looking at the new concept in terms of geomorphology in different fields or in different areas. So that will be our next thing that we are going to be looking at. For now, I beg we submit.